And a body's been found in Laos by rescuers searching for a missing British woman. 37-year-old Joanna Powell from Cardiff hasn't been seen since Saturday after a boat she was on sank in the Mekong River. LBC weather. Sunny spells in London and the southeast into the evening, staying quite clear overnight with lows of 7 Celsius. Rain often heavy in western and northern Scotland tonight. Some showers in Northern Ireland, cloudy elsewhere with some fog in southern England and parts of Wales. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Rupert Bartia.
I'm Joanne Webb. In the LBC Travel Centre, there are long delays on the Surrey stretch of the M25, anti-clockwise, all the way from Junction 8 at Reigate to just before Junction 6 at Godstone, where there's been an accident involving quite a number of cars. Only one lane is open and it's taking over an hour to get through that queue. It's also having an impact onto the M23 as well, southbound from Hooley and northbound from Junction 9 at Gatwick Airport. 5 miles of queues on the M4 eastbound to Junction 27 at High Cross, and this is because of an accident. There's a load of debris all over the motorway as well, so one lane is still closed. It's still taking around 45 minutes to get through those queues, so if you can avoid it, definitely do so. In Cheshire, the M56 delays of over half an hour going eastbound on the M56 to Junction 14 at Hapsford, and that's after that lorry hit that bridge earlier. There's still one lane closed. Better news in Lincolnshire. The A15, I've been telling you for ages, has been closed both ways at Bourne. In the last few moments, that's just reopened. And on the M1 in West Yorkshire, very slow northbound to Junction 46 at the A63 exit because a car's overturned on the exit slip road. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With GoToMeeting. Up your game with a free 30-day trial.
The following is based on a real investment scam from the files of the Financial Conduct Authority.
Hi, it's Stephen from Z&Y Investments. I'm calling because our yields have just exceeded 40%, making this the perfect time to invest. Now, I think we should start small, say £5,000. You have made successful investments like this before, haven't you? Of course. Now, all you need is courage and belief. You've just made a very good decision.
Scams are scripted to appear just like genuine investments, but rejecting cold calls, checking the FCA warning list, and getting impartial advice can help you to avoid them. Be a scam-smart investor. Visit fca.org.uk/scamsmart.
If you need a full set of teeth replacing, now there's an alternative to the discomfort of dentures or the lengthy, painful treatment of traditional implants. I'm Dr. Michael Zibitz, dental specialist at TDC Implant Centre, and our award-winning new procedure could give you a full set of beautiful fixed teeth restored in just one day. Contact us now to find out more. See smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Harley Street on 0203 7334 986.
Landlords. Direct Line guaranteed to beat any quote for the same cover. Can your landlord insurance do that? Search Direct Line Landlord. New customers only. Qualifying criteria apply. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
My Ivor. Oh, where do I start? He's always snoring away. He constantly hogs the remote control in the evening and is forever dragging mud into the house with the grandkids. But there's only one thing I wish I could change about him, though. His cholesterol.
Help the remote hogger in your life lower their cholesterol in 21 days. Search Flora Proactive online and order your free cholesterol-lowering starter kit now. Flora Proactive contains plant sterols shown to lower blood cholesterol. High cholesterol is a risk factor of coronary heart disease. Eating 1.5 to 2.4 grams of plant sterols a day can lower cholesterol by 7 to 10% in 2 to 3 weeks when consumed as part of a healthy diet and lifestyle.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. LBC's Election Call.
Now, every day during the campaign, we'll be giving you the chance to question a senior politician about what matters to you. Across the week, we're going to hear from all the main parties as Britain decides. And for the next 30 minutes, it's the turn of Neil Hamilton, who is UKIP's Deputy Chairman. That's Election Call with Neil Hamilton. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you'd like to put a question to Neil. Well, welcome, Neil. I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but I don't know if you've seen the ICM poll today showing UKIP on 9%. How do you account for the drop in UKIP support in the polls?
Well, it's only one poll, of course, and we've averaged over the poll of polls. That's the average of every poll that's published. In the last couple of months, anything between sort of 13 and 19%. So averaged it out, it comes to about 15.
But you'll accept that there is a bit of a dip going on.
Well, 9% is a figure that we haven't scored for goodness knows how long, so clearly that's a rogue poll. Things go up and down in election campaigns, and I've no doubt that because of the concentration of media coverage on Miliband and Cameron, that does have an effect on the polls. But
quite a lot of Nigel Farage, to be fair.
It's quite
a lot of coverage for Nigel Farage too.
Well, nothing like the sort of coverage we've had for Miliband and Cameron. We're launching our manifesto on Wednesday this week, so
competing with the Liberal Democrats.
Well, they're competing with us. Yes, more fool them.
Right, let's go to your calls. Ian is in Brighton. Hello, Ian.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Good evening, Neil.
Hello.
Hi. I've got a question for you. Well, it's a triple question, all in one.
Oh, dear.
Perhaps you can shed some light. No, it's quite simple. I'm sure you'll manage the answer. Make it multiple choice. Might make it easier.
Come on, get out with it, Ian.
Do you understand why people were so up in arms regarding the HIV tourism quote that Nigel Farage used? If you do understand why people were up in arms, can you please explain that to everybody listening, just in case anybody doesn't understand why people were? And on that case, would you say that it was a good choice?
Well, let me just put that into context, Ian. For those of you who don't know what Ian's on about, in the debate in Salford, the ITV debate, Nigel Farage said that he wanted to stop people with HIV coming into this country because it was a burden on the NHS. I think I've summed that up reasonably fairly. It did cause offence to a lot of people, Neil, didn't it?
Well, he did choose a specific example, and no doubt he chose it because he knew it would get the public attention. He was making a simple point that we have a national health service. We can't afford for it to be an international health service. There's a limited amount of money in the pot, and that means we have to make choices. So if we're having people who've never paid into the system coming to this country to be treated with expensive treatments for an indefinite period of time, that's inevitably going to reduce the amount of money available to treat other conditions.
Why did he pick on people with HIV? He could have said many other things, couldn't he?
He could, but he probably wouldn't have got as much media attention.
So it was a deliberate attempt to provoke the media?
No, it wasn't a deliberate attempt to provoke the media, but he knew that in order to get the coverage for his point that we want a national health service, not an international health service, he chose to mention HIV rather than say tuberculosis or Alzheimer's disease or anything else which requires a lot of expensive treatment for an indefinite period of time. I don't think he was in any way demonising HIV sufferers. Of course, HIV is a terrible condition. Fortunately, in the last 20 years, of course, treatment has improved. But
Ian?
Just briefly. HIV is a cross-sexuality disease, but it's unfortunate that many people are ill-educated on the subject. So you've explained why you think he said what he did. Do you agree with him using that choice of disease? Do you?
Well, I don't see personally anything wrong with it. I saw, if you look at Guido Fawkes' website, he publishes the figures for HIV sufferers and the proportion of them that happen to be people who've come here from abroad. He could have. Well, from memory, it's something like 115,000, of whom 59% are not British people who have paid into the system in their lives. He could have chosen, for example, foreign mothers who come here to give birth. There's a specific problem with Nigerians there. But this was not a choice of a medical condition which was chosen specifically to demonise HIV sufferers.
That's what a lot of people thought.
Why choose it then?
No, well, I said because he knew that's what would get the maximum amount of attention. What I think is a very good point, that we want a national health service, not an international health service.
OK, Ian, thank you for that. Let's go to Marcus in Greenwich. Marcus, what's your question for Neil Hamilton?
Hi, good evening. I'm sort of slightly sick of what I'm hearing. But I just so happen to be a European, as you can tell from my really thick foreign accent. I also happen to be half Nigerian as well. And I'm pretty sure I don't have AIDS, Mr. Hamilton, but never mind. I would really like to know why I'm considered more of a threat to this economy and to the well-being of this country, considering that, well, obviously being an immigrant and being an evil individual, as you might pretty much class me, how I've contributed to this economy, how I've actually helped employ people in the financial sector, how I've paid taxes, how I've actually never claimed any sort of benefits whatsoever, and ultimately, why am I more of a threat than Nigel Farage's wife, for example, who is in fact also German?
Yeah, well, we don't think immigrants are a threat at all. There's nothing to do with being a threat.
You just said the majority of people who come to this country from Nigeria have got AIDS.
No, to be fair, he didn't say that, Marcus.
Not at all. I mean, that's
he said that.
That's a travesty.
Generalising, it's disgusting, but go ahead, sorry.
That's a travesty of what I've just said. But then we're used to that in election campaigns. But, immigration is not uncontrolled, hasn't been uncontrolled in this country since the Aliens Act was passed in 1905. So every major political party standing in this election believes in some immigration control. The question is, what is the nature of that control? We have 300,000 people a year being added to the population of this country because of the current immigration rules. We know we can't control immigration at all from other parts of the EU. Because the Eurozone is in a massive crisis, the British economy is in a much better condition. That means
the British economy is not failing because there are immigrants in this country.
No, I'm not suggesting it is. I'm saying because the British economy...
Point of view
do you want me to answer the question?
I'd love to.
Well, let's listen then. Because the economy is reasonably prosperous compared with the European economies, that means we're going to get more people coming from the other parts of the continent to this country. Now, we can't go on forever adding 300,000 a year to our population. So we have to introduce some kind of control. What we want is an Australian point system, which means that we can choose the nature of the immigrants that we have by reason of what they can contribute to our society. What we want are professional people and people who fill skills gaps. What we don't want are masses of unskilled immigrants who are going to depress wages at the bottom end of the income scale.
You believe in the market. You're essentially, in UKIP terms, quite a libertarian. Yeah. So surely the market determines if immigrants are wanted in this country or not. Now, we have a relatively low rate of unemployment compared with other European countries. So surely we are able to assimilate the number that have come in.
300,000 a year indefinitely. The average rate of immigration over the last 50 years has been less than 50,000 a year. This is immigration of a completely different order to what we've had previously. When Enoch Powell made his famous Rivers of Blood speech back in 1968... Listen.
Wait for the point, Marcus,
the point I'm making is that when Enoch Powell made his Rivers of Blood speech 50 years ago, net immigration was 35,000 a year. Now it's 300,000 a year. So
Neil?
I'm saying that was in 1960, over 300,000 this year.
Time has moved on and the global population has increased. And you know what? Actually, people get on planes.
Are you saying we should abolish all immigration control?
We built a big
Are you saying we should abolish all immigration controls then?
Excuse me?
Are you saying we should abolish all immigration controls?
Of course not abolish all immigration controls.
It's
sole policy, Neil.
So how are you going to select who comes here and not?
If you allow me to speak now, has been blaming, quite frankly, a group of people who actually don't have a unified voice in this country.
We're not blaming them.
Are not the sole issue of what has been happening to this country. Can you please explain to me why, for example, the economy has increased significantly over the last 3.5 years? I'm sure you won't say it's down to Conservative policy. Fine, I'm not necessarily a Conservative voter. But I guess that you can't blame that, or would you be blaming that on the...
Well, from the pit of the recession... From the pit of the recession in 2009, and given that the government has created £375 billion of funny money, which the Bank of England now has on its books, it would be very surprising if the economy hadn't recovered somewhat, but it's a debt-fueled boom.
Marcus, thank you very much indeed for that. Very spirited question and responses there. You can, of course, watch us at lbc.co.uk. Just click on the link and a screen will magically appear. David is in Enfield. Hello, David.
Yeah, good evening, and good evening, Neil.
Hello.
Neil, my question is the following. It's been disclosed in the House of Lords recently that over the next 7 years, up to 2020, we'll be sending an estimated £182 billion of taxpayers' money abroad. Now, that's broken down into £98 billion in gross contributions if our economy grows fast, £64 billion net, and then we're going to, now they've passed this law to entrench foreign aid, we're going to be spending at least $84 billion in foreign aid. Now, we're doing this when our...
David, I need you to get to your question. Well, he seems to... I think we've lost David. We'll try and come back to him. Rob is in Hackney. Hello, Rob.
Oh, hi. Good evening, gents.
Hi.
Hello, Rob.
Hi, Mr. Hammond. What I wanted to ask you was, we've heard Miliband's manifesto pledges today, and Vorch are going to have a lot of work to do if he was to get in. I wanted to know, if you guys were to hold the balance of power, how would you handle the deficit?
Well, neither Labour, the Tories, nor the Liberals have been straight with the British public about the scale of the problem here. The deficit was this week scaled upwards by the Office of National Statistics from 90 billion to 99 billion pounds a year. That's 5% of our gross national product, our national income. You know, we cannot go on indefinitely living on tick, because what's happening here is that the bills are being incurred today and we're leaving it to our children and grandchildren to pay them off. That, I think, is grossly immoral. And for all the talk of austerity, actually there hasn't been any austerity at all. The government has borrowed more.
Excuse me?
There has been no austerity at all. The government has borrowed in the last 5 years £750 billion. That's twice as much as Gordon Brown borrowed in the previous 13 years. So to call George Osborne a purveyor of austerity is a travesty of the truth.
Well, try telling that to somebody who's unemployed. Try telling that to somebody who's visiting a food bank. Tell them that there's been no austerity, and I suspect you'd get a pretty ripe response.
No, well, there will always be people in society who are unfortunate and become unemployed or are relatively poor. Of course, I'm not suggesting that that there is no poverty and there's no deprivation. But all I'm saying is that in the public finances, if austerity is defined as introducing massive cuts in government spending, that's something we've not seen.
So if it's not, what is it?
Well, it's a fraud, basically, because Osborne has tried to create the impression that there has been austerity, but in fact he's been printing money at twice the rate that Gordon Brown did.
So you think that there should be much deeper cuts in public spending? Where would those cuts fall?
No, I'm suggesting that we cannot go on indefinitely spending £100 billion a year that the government is not getting in tax revenue.
The Conservatives want to cut £30 billion from public expenditure over the next 3 years. How much do you think a UKIP government would cut?
If you want to balance the budget, of course, nobody's proposing that you should do that in a single year or even a single parliament, but you should have a plan for a long-term balance in the government's books. And it's grossly irresponsible to have a debate on something which has not been happening. So what I'm suggesting is that we need an honest debate on this and how to cope with the problem.
Right. Well, Rob, a quick response from you.
Well, I partially agree, actually, with what Mr. Hammond said. And I look forward to seeing what he will do should he have the opportunity.
Can I just make a quick point here? We give $20 billion a year to the EU in membership subscriptions. We're spending $12 billion a year on overseas aid. We have plans to spend up to £100 billion on the HS2 project. There are masses of areas of government spending where you could make economies, but none of the other major parties has any interest in making them.
Right, we've got David back on the line. Remember, his line went funny. David, what's your question?
Yeah, sorry, we're going to be spending 182 billion.
Yeah, no, we remember all that. I just want your question.
Right. My question is, does Neil, in terms of the current fiscal situation, does Neil think it makes sense?
I don't think it makes sense to spend those sums or in that way. Certainly not. I'm all for, as are the overwhelming majority of the British people, humanitarian aid, disaster aid, and so on and so forth. But a huge proportion of the foreign aid budget doesn't go on worthwhile projects of that kind.
So $13 billion at the moment. What would you want to cut it to?
The UKIP proposal is to cut it to $2 billion. So we'd save $10 billion on the aid budget.
David, you happy with that?
Yeah, but I just wanted to make a point on the EU. We're sending all this money to the EU, yet we're running a huge trade deficit with the EU, which no politician talks about.
No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, the figures that were announced this week are that in this quarter alone with the EU, we have a trade deficit of 21 billion. That's 84 billion a year. We have a trade surplus with the rest of the world. So the idea that if we were to come out of the EU, suddenly the trade barriers would go up against us and the Europeans would refuse to sell us their BMWs, Mercedes and Audis is, of course, total nonsense.
Ian is in Guildford. Hello, Ian.
Oh, hi. Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. It's a quick question, really, and it's not meant as a funny question, so please don't take it as such. But I think
I'm on my guard now.
You've been speaking an awful lot of truth. Maybe I don't like some of the way that you've been saying some things, but I agree with a lot of things that you do say. I think it's fair to say we know that UKIP, unless something catastrophic happens, and remarkable, you're not going to get in with a majority vote, and you're not going to be a controlling government. So, given that, who would you like to see actually in control at the end of the next election?
Well, my view is that you can't really put a cigarette paper between Miliband, Cameron and Clegg on most of the important policies which the government has in its locker. And it doesn't really matter to us because our main raison d'etre is to get out of the EU, and neither the Conservatives nor the Liberals nor the Labour Party
you were originally a Conservative MP, so presumably if you had to pick one, you'd pick your old party.
Well, my personal preference would be for that, but that's not a party preference. UKIP doesn't have...
I'm asking for yours.
Amongst the ugly systems that we're fighting in this election.
No, but what's your personal preference?
Well, my personal preference, obviously based on my historical leanings, would be for that. But that's not an advice that I'm giving anybody else.
Well, but Nigel Farage is, isn't he? I've been reading in the papers today. He's been saying that where UKIP doesn't stand a chance of winning, people should vote Conservative, which is an extraordinary thing for him to say, bearing in mind he spent the last 6 months trying to woo Labour voters.
Yeah. Well, I haven't actually read exactly what he has said, but so that's certainly not the advice that I would give.
Let me tell you exactly what he said. Hang on, let me tell you what he's told the Telegraph. He says, of course, it's a complex electoral system and people have to use their votes as wisely as they can. He says if the Conservatives were the biggest to make up the numbers and this country had a full, free and fair referendum, that would be an infinitely better position. So he's clearly favouring the Conservatives.
Well, that would certainly be a better position than we got now, because what we want is a referendum, and neither the Liberals nor the Labour Party will offer us a referendum. But having said, I'm not convinced that we'll get a free and fair referendum from Cameron either.
Ian?
But I was just going to say, actually, I agree with him, actually, because we know Cameron's backtracked on a referendum before. But the thing is, if the Conservatives do need, let's just say, UKIP to form a coalition, then you would be in a much better position, would you not, with a Conservative government than a Labour government. As far as I'm aware, Conservative is, or they seem a little bit closer to your stance and your policies than the Labour Party.
Quick answer, Neil.
Well, I don't trust the Conservative Party under its current leadership, and therefore I wouldn't in any circumstances want to join a coalition with them. But we would...
So you wouldn't endorse Nigel Farage's comments?
Well, I think those comments have been misinterpreted, actually.
They were fairly clear.
No, I think
direct quotes.
From what you've just said of those quotes, and what he was saying is that it would be a better option than what we've got now, and that's incontestable.
OK, let's go to Joe, who's in Hampton. Hello, Joe.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Hamilton.
Hello, Joe.
About 2-in-1 question for you.
Yes.
I do remember very well that you took a brown envelope from Mr. Al-Fayed.
No, I didn't, I'm afraid.
OK, fine. And what is the guarantees do we have that when you get into Parliament, you're not going to do the same again?
Well, I'm not a candidate.
Is it because Mr. Al-Fayed exposed you? That is why now you've joined UKIP and you are anti-immigration. Because the Tories themselves, your ex-party, won't touch you.
Well, let me make this absolutely clear. I never took any brown envelopes from Mr. Al-Fayed. I went through a 2-year investigation by the Inland Revenue's top forensic accountants, and I came out of it at the end of the day completely squeaky clean. No mistakes in my tax returns. I never received any illicit payments, and the Inland Revenue accepted that. Otherwise, they would have wanted to tax me on them.
You said you're not a candidate in this
and I'm not
election.
A candidate in this election.
Why not? Because you wanted to be. You've been blackballed by Mr. Farage.
Well, I wanted to be a candidate. You're absolutely right.
You've been
and
blackballed
I'm not.
by Nigel Farage.
And I'm not. And I think we'll leave it at that at the minute. And you'll have to wait for my memoirs to discover the true story.
Andy's in Mill Hill. Hello, Andy.
You're very naughty, Ian.
Good evening, guys.
Ask Andy.
Really, really quickly, let's say that UKIP did get the majority vote and came into power. Subsequently,
well, I think I'd probably die of heart failure.
Everyone's talking about the trade impact in Europe, but what about the human cost? What would happen to the immigrants living and residing in the UK now from abroad? And also, on the flip side, what happened about the UK nationals living abroad in Europe? What would happen to them?
Well, what would happen to UK nationals living abroad would obviously depend upon the countries in which they are living, as it does indeed now. But no, our policy is to change the immigration rules so that we can control the flow into the country. It doesn't mean that we're going to expel anybody who's here at the moment. The point I was making earlier on is that the reason why we are having a big argument about immigration today is that the scale of it is on a completely different level from any that we've had in the last 50 years, or indeed 1,000 years for that matter, and we just on forever taking an uncontrolled flow. So it's merely a question of how do we control the flow.
But the logic of your position would be, though, that for people who are already here from EU countries, that you might want to say to some of them, would rather you left the country.
Well, I think even in practical terms, if we wanted to do that, that would be a very, very difficult thing to do. But that's not part of our policy at all. Our policy is simply to introduce controls to restrict the extent of future immigration.
But you see, even that answer leaves people thinking, well, he said they won't do it, but he clearly sounds as if he might quite like to do it. Why can't you just say we actually rejoice in the fact that we have a lot of people from different countries here and they've contributed a lot to our society? Of course we wouldn't want to send them back.
Well, of course it's axiomatic that immigration produces benefits as well as problems. And living in London, we all enjoy the diversity of a cosmopolitan global city. But if you're at the bottom of the income scale and living in one of our coastal towns on the East Coast, you might think rather differently about the benefits of immigration. Places which are deprived already and where the problems of deprivation are made massively worse by an enormous influx of unskilled, poor people who are competing for jobs, housing, transport, etc., etc.
OK, let's take a text from Darren in Henley, who says Wahid Ahmed, the Rochdale councillor's son who's been to Syria, tried to go into is rumoured to be back in the UK. What should happen to him?
Well, he's a British citizen, isn't he? But I don't know whether he has committed any breaches of the law, but he is entitled to the same benefit of the principle of you're innocent unless proven guilty as everybody else. And so I can't discuss an individual case.
But he was there with 8 people from his family on the Turkish-Syrian border, quite clearly wanting to go over. Take him out of the equation, though. What should happen generally to people who come back? Do you think that they all ought to be sort of tried under anti-terror legislation?
Well, I think the law should take its course. I mean, if it can be proved that they were assisting terrorism, then clearly that's a massively important criminal offence, and they should be prosecuted with the full rigour of the law.
Neil Hamilton, thank you very much indeed. It's been very spirited. Now, coming up later in the week on LBC's Election Call, we'll have Eric Pickles from the Conservative Party with me from 6 on Wednesday. Nick Clegg will be with Nick Ferrari on Thursday morning from 9, and a leading Labour Party politician joins me on Friday. I'll tell you more about that on tomorrow's show. And don't forget, if you miss anything, you can get all of this and more from LBC's podcast service. You can get full details at lbc.co.uk. This is LBC.
On FM, online, on your mobile.